And now I'd like to turn it over to Dan Vida, who is a manager of data and analytics at D+R International. He's also worked with HARDI for the development of their program, and he's invited a special guest to join us today, a distributor who's actually used HARDI data, Dan Benischek. We also have 3 members of the task force that spent over a year and a half specifying what we need this product to do and selecting the vendor to make it a reality. So we have Joanne from Standard Electric, David from Wesco, and Sherry from Border States Electric. And now I'll turn it over to Dan Vida. Thank you.
Thanks, Bethany. So before I jump in, I'll give a little bit more background about me, and then I'll turn it over to our panelists to give a quick 2 minutes about who they are. We heard a little bit about what organizations they're from, but they can get a little more into depth of that. Then we'll go over goals of the session and jump right into questions. So first, a little bit about D+R and myself. We've been in business, as you saw in the video, for about 35 years, primarily handling data market programs like this. I myself have been at D+R for 10 years. I've worked on the HARDI Unitary Report, the program similar to this for HARDI since its inception in 2012. I've been the lead analyst and project manager on that project for the past several years. And I have a couple of our colleagues are right in the table in the audience here, including our CEO. So if you want to have a chance to talk and learn more about us, feel free to come and stop us after that. We also have a table out by the registration. Enough about me. I want to throw it over to our esteemed panelists. I'll start on my far right with Sherry. So if you want to go ahead.
Perfect. Good afternoon. Thank you guys for joining us. I'm Sherry Elsey with Border States Electric. I am the manager of sales enablement and operations. So the team that I lead is responsible for all of our sales training and enablement, as well as Salesforce performance reporting and customer insights and analytics. So that really lends well to this particular project.
I'm Dave Sandor from Wesco. I'm the manager of sales and marketing analytics and supplier operations. Work very closely with our category management and customer segment teams in order to provide the amount of insight that they need to know how to strategically attack the market and tactically what actions we need to take.
I'm Joanne Moss. I'm with Standard Electric Supply Company out of Milwaukee. I have been with them for 2 years in the role of the Director of Marketing. Prior to that, I worked in a marketing capacity for Selecta Products.
And my name is Dan Benischek. I'm the VP of Operations and Technology for the Gustave A. Larson Company. We are one of the larger HVACR distributors within the U.S. We're a third-generation family-owned company that was established in 1936. And we've been using the tool as long as it's been available through HARDI.
Great. Okay, so quick, before I jump into the questions, just want to give a sense of the goals of what we hope to accomplish today. So we're going to ask about 3 to 4 pre-prepared questions to our panelists, give them time to answer. All those questions are about the whys and hows of this market data program and what everybody hopes to get out of it. After that, we'll turn it over and open it up to anybody in the room who would like to ask any of our panelists or the panel at large a question. And with that, I will jump into our first question. So the task force for NAED has been meeting pretty regularly since 2016, and we just recently started rolling out this. So Sherry, we'll start with you on the end. Why did you and your organization decide to get involved with the task force and sort of see this to where it is today?
Good question. So again, one of the things that I do for our organization is I help lead a team of analysts that works consistently to understand really trends in our market, our customer segmentation strategy, how we're approaching the market as well, similar to Dave. When the opportunity came up to be involved in this particular project, of course there was interest from our executive committee to make sure that we had a voice at the table. But really the important thing is we're working to help define how our industry sees market share and understand potential.
Joanne, I know we've had a number of interesting conversations, particularly about the different kinds of distributors that may be using this tool. So can you also talk a little bit about how Standard may end up using this and why you wanted to be part of this whole process?
Well, sure. When I first started with Standard a couple years ago, one of the first tasks was to look at our market share. So we had an existing tool already in place. The unfortunate thing, we're an industrial automation and control distributor. We do very little pipe and wire, very little construction, very little lighting. And so when I went to that tool to try to figure out, what are we doing with PLCs or HMIs? What is our market share for that? Or there's nothing out there. It's that other category. It's the miscellaneous category. So when I was starting that process, Bethany had reached out to me to say, how is that tool working for you? This is why I'm asking you. And I said, I would really like to be a part of that task force to see what are the methodologies you guys are using to see if I can influence it in such a way that as an industrial automation control distributor, I can get the information back that would be meaningful to my company.
Great. So Dave, from West Coast perspective, what was the idea behind getting involved here, and certainly from the beginning of this process?
Yeah, so similar to both Sherry and Joanne, I think that the alignment within the industry has been a little bit fragmented as far as what the different product categories are, for example, and how that might be reported at a market level, because we have a lot of different sources, or at least several different sources, that all have somewhat different methodologies. Some of them are aligned more with distributors, some of them are aligned more with manufacturers. And so one of the big interests for us is to see that, hey, if we can have a voice in what that structure looks like, then we can be sure that it aligns with the way we go to market, with the way distributors at large go to market, as opposed to being dictated by a third party that developed it with great intentions, but may not be exactly optimized for the way that we want to see it. And so I think that that's one of the common threads through a lot of this for us.
Yeah, and we've talked about that over the past several months, particularly. So can you expand on maybe ways you'll intend to use this tool once it's fully launched and ramped up?
Yeah, so for us, we have a couple of different areas that this is particularly useful for. First and foremost, strategic planning. How are we attacking and how are we defending in different areas of the country, or different product segments, different customer segments? What is the opportunity in different areas? Sometimes we have a pretty good sense of that. Sometimes we think we have a pretty good sense of that. And sometimes we know we don't have a good sense of that. So having that information available during our planning process, both on an annual basis, right, business planning, but also on an ongoing basis, allows us to make decisions faster. So I think that's one of the things that we plan to do and want to do, is if we can integrate this with some of our internal data as well, that gives us a much fuller, more holistic view. And our goal, and I think everybody's goal probably is similar, is we want to measure time with a watch, not with a calendar. So if we can have that information much sooner, then we can make those actions much sooner and then get ahead.
I would definitely echo Dave's words there. As far as utilizing the tool, again, we've all probably have a way of estimating potential that we're using, whether it be in a particular geographic region, particular product category, or customer segment. This would be a great way to verify that. And not based on methodology, based on actual true data. So again, a lot of verifying what we've done already and applying it to our current methodologies, but also I wholeheartedly agree with, as you're looking at our planning, strategic planning, it's how are we serving the markets that we serve? Are we overserving them? Are we underserving them? Are we not meeting the categories that we really should be meeting? This will give us that insight in a very timely manner.
And I think from my perspective, as a smaller to mid-size distributor, doesn't have all the branches you guys have. And obviously, I don't have all the staffing, data analysts, business analysts that other distributors have. So this gives me access to the same type of data that the larger distributors have that I can utilize in the same way. It would take me months to collect that. It may take you weeks, but now I have it instantly. So.
And Dan, I actually want to turn this over to you for a little bit, mostly because we've been working on the HARDI Unitary Report now for the past 5 years, and we've recently just gone from what was regional level reporting. HARDI has 7 regions they track typically, but we've now moved down to state level. Can you talk a little bit about how from Gustave A. Larson you guys are using that data now that it's a little more relevant to you?
Sure, not a problem. From a panelist perspective, I think the other 3 hit the nail on the head. All of the advantages of this tool for us. How do you make, you said methodology, how do you make rational, fact-based decisions as a company? Our company, we operate in 22 states out of 52 branches. So we have a very wide footprint. We go all the way from Las Vegas to Dayton, Ohio, up to Fargo and down to Kansas City and Albuquerque, in the south. So our feet on the street always used to be kind of where we would get a lot of our information as to how are we doing in a particular market, what are the trends in the market as it relates to efficiency, SEER ratings, and that kind of thing. From an HVAC perspective, we're in the business of selling products that make hot things cold and cold things hot. So every market has some very unique particulars around that. What you sell in Albuquerque is going to be very different than what you sell in a Chicago or a Minneapolis or a Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So taking all of those disparate pieces of information and being able to put them all together and be able to make strategic long-term and short-term decisions based off of that is very, very difficult. The tool itself, when it was at the regional level, and I believe it was the HARDI regions that was divided into, were usually groups of about 6 or 7 states that it would aggregate the data for. And for us, that was very useful from a overall market share perspective for those states. But it was also very useful to identify the trends in those states, or that grouping of states, to identify what SEER ratings or what efficiencies we were trending towards in those areas. Also, the movement from heat pumps from traditional ducted HVAC was another one. Now that it's gone down to the state data over the course of the last quarter, that's given us a lot more ability to go down into specific markets, because even a Lincoln, Nebraska may be very different than a Mason City, Iowa. We actually sell different brands in different regions, whether it be Trane, American Standard, Rheem, depending on the market we're in. We're actually competing with other brands in those areas, and knowing those trends is very helpful.
And so we had a great discussion as well last night about some of the other potential benefits of this program. So Dave, could you share a little bit about some of the just the data quality things that we were discussing last night about what you might be able to get out of this even without that sort of broad analysis?
Yeah, so one of the interesting benefits of this program in particular, a couple of us here on the panel have recently or are currently going through data management, data cleanup. Hey, what segment does this customer actually belong to? What product actually is this? Because as we've grown, as this industry has grown, a lot of us don't have the data from the very beginning that was clean all the way through. Or over time, it degrades because the businesses change and things start to get a little bit more gray. And so what we feel is that as part of this process, we'll submit some of our POS data, and in exchange, one of the benefits we get is the DNR team is actually scrubbing that data to make sure that in cases where there may not be a perfect NAICS code or a perfect SIC code, or maybe no NAICS code or SIC code at all, they can help us to define what that should be, feed it back to us for our unique identifiers, our account numbers or our customer numbers or whatever unique ID we give it, and then we can feed that back into our system. So in a lot of cases, you'd spend a lot of money, a lot of time, either internally or with consultants, going through that process to clean up that data. And that's one of the things I think that's a really huge benefit in terms of getting your data quality clean, because now your in-house data can be just as good as some of that external data. And also you can make sure that there's alignment, right? A lot of the challenge with some of the products in this space is how have they defined it? How does that align with what you have? And if one kind of points in this direction and one points in that direction, you don't necessarily know that they're apples to apples. Now we can establish, hey, here's the NAED classification for that, and we know exactly what apples to apples is. And then if we have a slightly different internal version, we know how to shade off of that to say maybe it's another point up or a point down.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it comes back to having set industry standards. some of those things that just haven't existed in the past. We too are one of those organizations that have spent a mass amount of time cleaning our customers' data, so understanding their NAICS, their SIC, the 4-digit, 8-digit, all of the above, right? But the questions and the commentary always still comes back is, and internally anyway, are we classifying our customers based on what they buy or what they do? And that conversation could go on and on and on, right? There's no real answer. But going back and having something that we can verify against, that provides that standard that at least we can all say we know exactly how this customer was viewed for this particular reporting. Now again, like Dave mentioned, if we have a little slightly different version in-house, that's okay, because that's our business, right? But this way we have this standard for our industry and we have a verifiable source to make sure we have our customers classified correctly.
Joanne, do you have anything you'd like to add to that? Or
I think they did a great job.
They did a great job. Okay, perfect.